안녕하세요. 네, 영어 쉐도잉 연습 17일차 시작하겠습니다. 네, 저는 지금 테드 영상을 보고 영어 쉐도잉을 하고 있고요. 매일매일 30분씩 영어 쉐도잉을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이러한 영상을 100일 동안 찍은 다음에 과연 제 영어 실력이 얼만큼 향상되는지를 보려고 합니다. 제가 보고 있는 영상의 제목은 A Simple Way to Break a Bad Habit이라는 제목이고 저드슨 브루어라는 사람이 강연자입니다. 네, 그러면은 연습을 시작하겠습니다.
When I was first learning to meditate,
When I was first learning to meditate,
the instruction was to simply pay attention to my breath
the instruction was to simply pay attention to my breath,
and when my mind wandered to bring it back.
and when my mind wandered to bring it back.
Sounded simple enough,
Sounded simple enough,
yet I'd sit on these silent retreats,
yet I sit on the silent retreat,
sweating through t-shirts in the middle of winter.
sweating through t-shirts in the middle of winter.
I'd take naps every chance I got because it was really hard work.
I take naps every chance I got because it was really hard work.
Actually, it was exhausting.
Actually, it was exhausting.
The instruction was simple enough,
The instruction was simple enough,
but I was missing something really important.
but I was missing something really important.
So why is it so hard to pay attention?
So why is it so hard to pay attention?
Well, studies show
Well, studies show
that even when we're really trying to pay attention to something,
even when we are really trying to pay attention to something, even when we are really trying to pay attention to something, studies show that even when we are really trying to pay attention to something, that even when we are really trying to pay attention to something, that even when we are really trying to pay attention to something,
like maybe this talk,
like maybe this talk,
at some point about half of us will drift off into a daydream
at some point about half of us will drift off into a daydream,
or have this urge to check our Twitter feed.
or have this urge to check our Twitter feed.
So what's going on here?
So, what's going on here?
It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science.
It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science.
One that's conserved back to the most basic nervous system, like our Twitter feed. So what's going on here? It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science. One that
It turns out that we're fighting one of the most evolutionarily conserved learning processes currently known in science.
is conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man.
And that's conserved back to the most basic nervous systems known to man.
This reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement, and
This reward-based learning process is called positive and negative reinforcement,
basically goes like this.
and basically goes like this.
We see some food that looks good.
We see something that looks good.
Our brain says calories, survival.
Our brain says calories, survivor.
We eat the food, we taste it, it tastes
We eat the food, we eat the food, it tastes it, we taste good.
good. And
We
especially
taste it tastes good.
with sugar,
And especially with sugar,
our bodies send a signal to our brain that says,
body send a signal to our brain that says,
remember what you're eating and where you found it.
remember what you're eating, where you found it.
We lay down this context-dependent memory
We lay down this context-dependent memory
and learn to repeat the process next time.
and learn to repeat the process next time.
See food, eat food, feel good, repeat.
See food, eat food, feel good, repeat.
Trigger, behavior, reward. Simple,
Trigger,
right?
behavior, reward. Simple, right?
Well, after a while, our creative brains say,
Well, after a while, our creative brain says,
you know what? You can use this for more than just remembering where food is.
you know what? You can use this for more than just to remember where food is.
You know, next time you feel bad,
Next time you feel bad,
why don't you try eating something good
why don't you try eating something good
so you'll feel better?
so you'll feel better?
We thank our brains for the great idea,
We thank our brains for the great idea. We thank our brains for the great idea.
try this, and quickly learn that if we eat chocolate
Try this and quickly learn that if we eat chocolate
or ice cream when we're mad or sad, we
or ice cream when we're mad or sad,
feel better.
we feel better.
Same process, just a different trigger.
Same process, just a different trigger.
Instead of this hunger signal coming from our stomach,
Instead of this hunger signal coming from our stomach, this
emotional signal, feeling sad, triggers that urge to eat.
This emotional signal, feeling sad, triggers that urge to eat.
Maybe in our teenage years,
Maybe in our teenage years,
we were a nerd at school,
we were a nerd at school.
and we see those rebel kids outside smoking, we think, hey,
We see those level kids outside smoking. We think,
I want to be cool.
hey, I want to be cool.
So we start smoking.
So we start smoking.
The Marlboro Man wasn't a dork, and that was no accident.
The Marlboro Man wasn't a dork, and that was an accident. The Marlboro Man wasn't a dork, and that was an accident.
See cool, smoke to be cool, feel good. Repeat, trigger, behavior, reward. And each time we do this, we learn to repeat the process.
And each time we do this, we learn to repeat the process.
And it becomes a habit.
And it becomes a habit.
So later, feeling stressed out triggers
feeling stressed out,
that urge to smoke a cigarette,
feeling stressed out triggers that urge to smoke a cigarette, Feeling stressed out triggers the urge to smoke a cigarette
or to eat something sweet.
or to eat something sweet.
Now with these same brain processes,
Now with these same brain processes,
we've gone from learning to survive
we've gone from learning to survive
to literally killing ourselves with these habits.
to really killing ourselves with these habits.
Obesity and smoking are among the leading preventable causes of morbidity and mortality in the world.
Obesity and smoking are among the leading preventable causes of morbidity and mortality in the world. Obesity and smoking are among the leading preventable causes of morbidity and mortality in the world.
So back to my breath.
So back to my breath.
What if instead of fighting our brains or trying to
What if instead of fighting our brains or trying to
force ourselves to pay attention,
force ourselves to pay attention,
we instead tapped into this natural reward-based learning process?
we instead tapped into these natural reward-based learning processes,
But added a twist.
but added a twist.
What if instead we just got really curious about what was happening in our momentary experience?
What if instead we just got curious about what was happening in the momentary experience? What if instead we just got really curious what was happening in our momentary
Into
experience?
this natural reward-based learning process, but added a twist. What if instead we just got really curious about
What if instead we just got really curious What if instead we just got really curious? We just got really curious. Really curious. What if instead we just got really curious?
what was happening in our momentary experience. I'll give
Curious about what is happening in our momentary experience. What is happening in our momentary experience?
you an example.
I, I'll give you I'll give you an example.
In my lab, we studied whether mindfulness
In,
training could help people quit smoking.
in my lab, we studied whether mindful training could help people quit smoking.
Now, just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath,
Just like trying to force myself to pay attention to my breath,
they could try to force themselves to quit smoking.
they could try them. They could try to force themselves. They could try to force themselves quit smoking. They could try to force themselves to quit smoking. They could try to force themselves to quit smoking.
And the majority of them had tried this before and failed.
A majority of them had tried this before and failed.
6 times.
On average, 6 times.
Now, with mindfulness training, we dropped a bit about forcing.
In mindfulness training, we dropped a bit about forcing. We dropped a bit about forcing. We dropped a bit about forcing,
And instead focused on being curious.
and instead focused on being curious.
In fact, we even told them to smoke.
In fact, we even told them to smoke.
What? Yeah, we said, go ahead and smoke.
What we said, go ahead and smoke.
Just be really curious about what it's like when you do.
Just be really curious about what it's like when you do.
And what did they notice?
And what did they notice?
Oh, here's an example from one of our smokers.
Here's an example of one of our smokers.
She said, mindful smoking smells like stinky cheese and tastes like chemicals. Yuck.
She said mindful smoking smells like stinky cheese and tastes like chemicals. Yuck.
Now, she knew cognitively that smoking was bad for her.
Now she knew cognitively that smoking was bad for her.
That's why she joined our program.
That's why she joined our program.
What she discovered just by being curiously aware when she smoked
What she discovered just by being curious or aware when she smoked
was that smoking tastes like shit.
was that smoking tastes like shit.
Now, she moved from knowledge to wisdom. She
Now she moved from knowledge to wisdom.
moved from knowing in her head that smoking was bad for her
She moved from knowing in her head that smoking was bad for her
to knowing it in her bones.
to knowing it in her bones.
And this spell of smoking was broken.
And the spell of smoking was broken.
She started to become disenchanted with her behavior.
She started to become disenchanted with her behavior.
Now, the prefrontal cortex, that youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective,
Now, the prefrontal cortex, the youngest part of our brain from an evolutionary perspective,
it understands on an intellectual level that we shouldn't smoke.
it understands on an intellectual level that we shouldn't smoke.
And it tries its hardest to help us change our behavior.
And it tries its hardest to change. And it tries its hardest to help us change our behavior. And it tries hardest to help us change our behavior,
To help us stop smoking, to help us
to help us stop smoking, to help us stop
stop eating
eating
that
the
second,
second,
that
the third,
third,
the
that
fourth
cookie.
cookie.
We call this cognitive control. We're using cognition to control our behavior.
We call this cognitive control. We're using cognition to control our behavior.
Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when we get stressed out.
Unfortunately, this is also the first part of our brain that goes offline when it gets stressed out,
Which isn't that helpful.
which isn't that
And we can all
helpful.
relate to this in our own experience.
And we can relate to this in our own experience.
We're much more likely to do things like yell
We're much more likely to do things like
at our spouse or kids when we're stressed out or tired, even
Yet our spouse or kids when you're stressed out or tired, even
though we know it's not going to be helpful.
even though even though we know it's not gonna be helpful.
We just can't help ourselves.
We just can't help ourselves.
Now, when the prefrontal cortex goes offline, we
When the prefrontal cortex goes offline,
fall back into our old habit,
we fall back into our other habits,
which is why this disenchantment is so important.
which is why this thing, which is why this disenchantment is so important.
Seeing what we get from our habits helps us understand them in a deeper level.
Seeing what we get from our habits, understand them at a deeper level.
To know it in our bones, so we don't
To knowing our bones.
have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior.
We don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior. We don't have to force ourselves to hold back. We don't have to force ourselves to hold back or restrain ourselves from behavior.
We're just less interested in doing it in the first place.
We just le- we're just less interested in doing it in the first place.
And this is what mindfulness is all about.
This is what mindfulness is all about.
Seeing really clearly what we get when we get caught up in our behaviors,
Seeing really clearly what we get when we get caught up in our behaviors,
becoming disenchanted on a visceral level,
becoming disenchanted on a visceral level,
and from this disenchanted stance,
and from this disenchanted stance,
naturally letting go.
naturally letting go.
This isn't to say that
This isn't to say that
poof, magically we quit smoking,
magically we quit smoking,
but over time as we learn to see more and more clearly the results of our actions,
but over time, as we learn to see more and more clearly the results of our actions,
we let go of old habits and form new ones.
we let go of old habits and form new ones.
The paradox here
The
is
paradox
that
here-
mindfulness is just about being really interested
The paradox here, mindfulness is just about being really interested
in getting close and personal with what's actually happening in our bodies and minds from moment to moment.
in getting close and personal with what's actually happening in our bodies and minds from moment to moment. The paradox here is that mindfulness is just about being really interested in getting close and personal with what's actually happening in our bodies and minds from moment to moment.
This willingness to turn toward our experience rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible.
This willingness to turn toward our experience rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible.
And this willingness to go away as quickly as possible. And it's rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible.
Rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible. Rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible. Rather than trying to make unpleasant cravings go away as quickly as possible.
And this willingness to turn toward our experience
And the willingness to turn toward our experience
is supported by curiosity,
is supported by curiosity,
which is naturally rewarding.
which is naturally rewarding.
What does curiosity feel like?
What is curiosity feel like?
It feels good.
It feels good.
And what happens when we get curious?
And what happens when you get curious?
We start to notice the cravings are simply made up of body sensations.
We start to notice that cravings are simply made up of body sensations.
Oh, there's tightness, there's tension,
Oh, there's tightness. Oh, there's tightness. Oh, there's tension.
there's restlessness,
There's restlessness.
and that these body sensations come and go.
And these body sensations come and go.
These are bite-sized pieces of experiences.
These are bite-sized pieces of experiences
that we can manage from moment to moment,
that we can manage from moment to moment,
rather than getting clobbered by this huge,
rather than getting clobbered by this huge,
scary craving that we
scary
choke
craving that we choke on.
on. In other words,
In other words,
when we get curious,
when we get curious,
we step out of our old fear-based reactive habit patterns
we step out of we step out of our old fear-based one fear-based fear-based reactive habit pattern. We step out of our old fear-based reactive habit patterns. We step out of our old fear-based reactive habit patterns,
and we step into being.
and we step into being.
We become this inner scientist. We're,
We become this inner scientist,
we're eagerly awaiting that next data point.
where we're eagerly awaiting that next data point.
Now, this might sound too simplistic to affect behavior,
Now, this sound this sound that this sound too simplistic. This sound too simplistic to affect behavior. Now, this might sound too simplistic to affect behavior.
but in one study we found that mindfulness training was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking.
It, but in one study we found that mindfulness is about mindfulness was twice as good as mindfulness. In one study we found that mindfulness was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking. Was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking.
But in one study we found that mindfulness training was
But one study we found that mindfulness training But in one study we found that mindfulness training
twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking.
was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking. Was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking. Was twice as good as gold standard therapy at helping people quit smoking.
So it actually works.
So it actually works.
And when we studied the brains of experienced meditators,
And when we study the brains of and when we study the bra- and when we study the and when we study the brains of experienced meditators,
we found that parts of a neural network of self-referential processing called the default mode network were at play.
we found that the parts of our brains of self-referential processing called default mode network were at play.
Now, one current hypothesis of experienced meditators, we found that parts of a neural network of self-referential processing
We found that parts of our neural network of self-referential processing. We found that parts of our neural network of self-referential processing
called the default mode network were
called the default mode network. We found that the parts of neural network. We found that the parts of neural network of self-referential processing called the default mode network
play.
were at play.
Now, one current hypothesis is that a region of this network called the
Now one
posterior cingulate cortex is activated not necessarily
Now one hypothesis is that a region of this network called the posterior cingulate cortex
by craving itself, but when we get caught up in it, when we get sucked into the cingulate cortex, is activated not necessarily by craving itself, but a network were at play. Now, one current hypothesis is that a region of this network called
Now one current hypothesis is that a region of this network
the posterior cingulate cortex
called the posterior cingulate cortex
is activated not necessarily by craving itself, but when we get caught up in it,
is activated not necessarily craving itself,
we get sucked in and it takes us for a ride.
but when it gets caught up in it, when it gets sucked in it, it takes us for a ride. is is activating unnecessary is activating unnecessary by craving itself, and when we get caught up in it, when it gets sucked in it, it takes us for a ride.
In contrast, when we let go,
In contrast, when you let go,
step out of the process just
step out of process,
by being curiously aware
just by being curiously aware,
of what's happening, this same brain region quiets down.
just by being really curious what's happening, this 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 brain this brain region quiets down. This same brain region quiets down. This same brain region quiets down.
Now we're testing app and online-based mindfulness training programs
Now we are testing app and online-based mindfulness training
that
programs
target these core mechanisms.
that target these core mechanisms.
And ironically, use the same technology that
And ironically, use same technologies,
is driving us to distraction
technology that's driving us to distraction,
to help us step out of our unhealthy habit patterns of smoking, of
that step out of our unhealthy habit patterns to smoking,
stress eating, and other addictive
to stress eating, or other addictive behavior.
behaviors. To distraction to help use the same technology that's driving us to distraction to target these core mechanisms. And ironically, use the same technology that's driving us to distract
And ironically, use the same technology that's driving us to distraction. And ironically, use the same technology that's driving us to distraction, driving us to distraction,
to help us step out of our unhealthy habit patterns of smoking,
to help us step
to help us step out of
to help us step out of our unhealthy habit patterns, to help us step out of our unhealthy habit patterns, to help us step out of our unhealthy habit patterns
our unhealthy habit patterns of smoking, of stress eating, and other addictive behaviors.
of smoking, of stress eating, and other addictive behaviors, of smoking, of stress eating, and other addictive behaviors.
Now remember that bit about context-dependent memory?
Now remember that bit about context-dependent memory?
We can deliver these tools to people's fingertips in the context that matter most. So now remember that bit about context-dependent memory? We can deliver these tools
We can deliver these tools
to people's fingertips in the context that matter most.
to people's fingertips in the context that matter most.
So we can help them tap into their inherent capacity
So we can help them tap into their inherent capacity
to be curiously aware right when that urge
to be curious aware right when the urge to
smoke or stress eat or whatever
right when the urge to smoke or stress eat,
arises.
whatever arises.
So if you don't smoke or stress eat or whatever arises.
Right when the urge to smoke or stress eat or whatever arises. Right when the urge to smoke or stress eat or whatever arises.
So if you don't smoke or stress eat,
So if you don't smoke or stress eat,
maybe the next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're
so if you don't smoke or stress eat, maybe the next time you'll feel the urge to check your email when you're
bored or you're trying to distract yourself from work,
bored or you're trying to distract yourself from work, or you're trying to play, or you're trying to distract or you're trying to distract yourself from work.
or whatever arises. So if you don't smoke or stress eat,
So if you don't smoke or stress eat, so if you don't smoke or stress eat,
Maybe the next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're bored or you
Maybe the next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're bored. Maybe the next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're bored. Maybe the next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're bored.
you're trying to distract yourself from work,
Or you're trying to list, or you're trying to, or you're trying to distract yourself from work, or you're trying to, or you're trying to distract yourself from work.
or maybe to compulsively or stressy. Maybe the next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're bored or
Check your
you're
email when you're bored. Check your email when you're bored.
trying to distract yourself from work,
Or you're trying to or you're trying to distract you, or you're trying to distract yourself from work.
next time you feel this urge to check your email when you're bored or you're trying to distract yourself from work,
Distract yourself from work. Distract yourself from work. Or you're trying to distract yourself from work. Distract yourself from work. Or you're trying to distract yourself from work.
or maybe to compulsively respond
Or maybe to compulsively respond
to that text message when you're
to that text message when you're
driving. See if you can tap into
See if you can tap into
this natural capacity. Just
this natural capacity.
be curiously aware of what's
Just be curious aware.
happening in your body and mind in that moment.
Just be curious aware what's happening in your body and mind in the moment.
It will just be another chance to perpetuate one of our
will-
endless and exhaustive habit loops.
It will just be another chance to perpetuate endless and exhaustive habit loops,
Or step out of it.
or step out of it.
Instead of see text message, compulsively text back,
Instead of see text message, compulsively text back.
feel a little bit better.
Feel a little bit better.
Notice the urge.
Notice the urge.
Get curious.
Get curious.
Feel the joy of letting
Feel
go.
the joy of letting go
and repeat.
and repeat.
Thank you.
Thank you. 네, 오늘은 조금 어제는 다 틀어놓고 쭉 해봤는데요. 오늘은 조금 천천히 보면서 좀 잘 안 됐던 부분들을 여러 번 반복을 연습을 했습니다. 네, 그러면 내일은 한번 또 쭉 따라가면서 동시에 하는 거를 또 해보겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.